Hello and welcome back to another week of the Reddit League show. We're now in week 4 of season 6, and this week we were playing Argentina. And joining me today is Carpographer, who is currently playing in Division 4 since last season. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Happy to be here.
Yeah, nice to have you. And let's get right into it then. And our first thing to look at is the Reddit League next standings, where for the first time, G-Pop hasn't got the top score of the week, as Secateur takes it. Not by a lot. G-Pop is still second on the results for that, so still keeping his lead, but at least there's some change-ups here.
Yeah, G Papa maybe didn't have the best week, but looking at the results of the rest of the division, definitely, still a standout performance. Argentina clearly was a difficult map for a lot of these players, and coming in second is still really good. Yeah.
Yeah, a very difficult map in general. I don't think the next seed itself was particularly difficult. More so, I think, on the level of the other, well, four of the other seeds, except for one in particular. But obviously, with only 3 minutes down here and a relatively difficult map as well, you're seeing some pretty low scores there. Gives kind of more importance as well, or maybe not more importance, but more of an opportunity for some of the players who really put into practice to make more of a difference here on some of those more difficult maps. Yeah, not too much movement though. Especially like you can see there, we had one change of Sikater overtaking Glum Smile, but other than that, a lot of people staying in their positions, but still relatively close in the overall standings. Kind of a few groupings forming. But yeah, still 7 weeks to play, a lot to go. Looking
Yeah.
into the normal divisions now. Wow, I say normal divisions. At the
Mm.
the 1 versus 1 divisions in Division 5B. And I mentioned it earlier, that one particular seed. Yeah, it was the Division
Mm.
5 seed that proved to be quite troublesome for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just looking at how everyone across the league did on that seed. Very few scores over 20,000, which I mean you typically do tend to see that. And in Division 5 itself, only what's that, like 3 people or 4 people got over 15,000. And yeah, that really speaks for itself in terms of the difficulty of the seed.
Yeah, not a lot of high scores here. There wasn't really much civilization to be found. I think probably fair to say if you'd like chose the right directions and you had some good practice, like 3 or 4 of the rounds were at least solvable in a way that you could probably tell which area of the country you were in. But yeah, we saw no one really with any standout performances in the sense that, getting close to those 25,000 points. Not too many surprising results. The biggest surprise probably is Soundbite coming out with a win against Danny Blondes. Not a big win, just under 800 points actually, but still probably not what you would have expected coming into this season, that you'd see Soundbite pulling off a win against Danny Blondes. But yeah, fantastic performance from him. Very close game as well between Penguin and Lajej, who, has, after a difficult start, at least gotten some points on the table here. And Yellowlet as well. First win for them against Treblia, who didn't quite manage to put up a lot of points here.
Yeah, definitely that match between Soundbite and Danny Blonde really close. A bit unfortunate for Danny Blonde, who, like we said, had one of the higher scores in the division and um, picked up a loss. They do get a bonus point for their efforts. But yeah, with that kind of score against pretty much any other player, you would have expected a win. So that's unfortunate. Um, and then we also have Swiss Snow, who, well, has had a pretty standout performance in the division so far, and they put up again the best score of the division. Do get a bit lucky with their matchup not scoring too well, but with that high of a score, it wouldn't have mattered anyway.
Yeah, exactly. If you've got the top score, usually you can be like, well, it doesn't really matter who I'm playing. And yeah,
Yeah.
it happened to just be the person with the lowest score this time. But yeah, kind
Hmm.
of the best case scenario, I guess, there. But let's take
Yeah.
a look at the table. And with those results, you can see Mr. Swiss Snow still at the top there, of course. Probably wasn't even the first time he had the highest score. He's been playing tremendously so far, still with a perfect record, as well as Palena, who is a bit of a surprise with 4 wins out of 4. Not always the highest scores, but, you know, doing better than your opponent, you don't necessarily need the highest scores. Another interesting factor there, looking at it actually, is kind of the amount of aces where both of them are only on 4, whereas Danny Blonde's, for example, behind them, already on 2 losses, but with a perfect game from, I don't even remember if it was last week. Let me actually quickly check that.
Mm.
No, it was Finland
Uh,
actually in week 1.
yeah.
But with that, lots of aces, but still 3 points behind already. And then we're kind of seeing, relatively even gaps between players. Still, everything relatively close together. Lolette with the first win jumping out of that last place.
Yeah. Definitely, there's a bit of a gap opening up ahead of Danny Blonde, so it might become a little harder for uh, them and for Arno Nono to maybe catch up to them and maybe challenge for one of the direct promotion spots. Um, but yeah, I think Danny Blonde maybe had a few, I guess, unlucky matches like we just saw. Um, but it does mean that they can put up a good performance and actually try and break into those spots. That 3 point difference is going to be a bit of a hill to climb, but um, I know they have in them. We'll see what happens of that. But further down the table, it's fairly even. Maybe difficult for some of those players to even try and challenge for the like playoff promotion playoff spot. Um, but uh, I think a lot of them putting in well fairly even performances. You can see Penguin, Corgi, Lagesh, and Soundbite all at the same record so far, which is interesting.
Yeah. Danny Blonde also already has played against Mr. Swiss Snow, so probably the most difficult match out of the way. And time to catch up on points now. Looking at the next week, he'll be playing against Zeppelin, which he is the favorite for. I would say not the easiest map, not the easiest matchup, but a good opportunity to get back on some winning ways. I gotta say, the first time I saw that picture Zatomo picked out as the background for Virginia, I
Mhm.
did kind of read it as Virginia is for losers on first look. So maybe not the best design choices, but
Mhm.
maybe fitting with some of the map, some of the seeds we're going to play. We'll see about that. Um, Other than that, newcomer matchup between Cougars and Lolette might be very interesting. I think it's 10th against 11th, so very important for both of them in the fight against relegation. And yeah, Helena, the only American in this division, might just, have that little bit of home advantage to keep that winning run going.
Yeah, uh, Pelena's playing Arno now, so both players near the top of the table. If Pelena wins, it's just gonna keep them well in the running for their direct promotion spots. And Arno might want to try and pull off an well, he'll definitely want to try and pull off an upset um, to maybe have a better chance up there. Uh, like you said, Lolette and Cookers, both players near the bottom of the table in 10th and 12th. So it's going to be really important for them if they want to get out of the. Um, I guess it is a relegation spot, but yeah.
Yeah, relegation into nothingness, kind
Yeah.
of into next season's preseason.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think no also, from what I remember, might feel more comfortable with something like Virginia, something where there's a little bit more information compared to at the
Mhm.
Argentina map. And yeah, some interesting matchups for sure. Trebly High against Penguin, I think, is something that's very even. in terms of skill, that could be a pretty close matchup as well. Looking at
Yeah.
the other side of Division 5, sorry, kind of a
Mhm.
similar picture, a few more higher scores compared to Division 5B, where we pretty much only saw Mr. Swiss Snow at like 18k, like as the only one above 17k. And here we have three people with Mr. Fish, Greasy, Church Killer, and Hodi, who all manage above 17,000 points. And kind of Jack filling out the spot from Danny Blondes in the other division, having a relatively high scoring game, and unfortunately coming up against Mr. Fish there, not quite enough for a win.
Yeah, that's definitely rather unfortunate. Jack so far. Um, well, he's been doing pretty well. And yeah, that's not going to help his record for sure. If he wanted to keep up with Greasy at the top of the table, but he's still done so well so far. He's well up into the top spots, and a win like this, it did he get a bonus point off of this?
Yes, fourth
Yeah,
best
he did.
score. Mm.
Yes. So he at least had that for himself, and um, yeah, I mean the match was against Mr. Fish, who's the third ranked player. So it's not as bad as maybe losing to one of the players lower down, where maybe you expected to pick up a win. But yeah, not going to be ideal for him.
Yeah, it's actually an interesting point where, like you said, it might be better to lose against someone, who you might maybe not expect to lose against, but someone who's, a stronger player. Whereas you could also make that argument where you'd rather want to take away points from the stronger players, because in this scenario, kind of like giving your direct opponent some free points. Whereas if you lose against someone further down the table, they're probably not going to matter to you. Um, but yeah, obviously, that would mean some easier matchups to come potentially, where as long as he wins those, it should be fine. Uh, Damir, unfortunately, picking up a yellow card there, first of the season for Division 5, in a game where he probably could have used to, just play, because Klimu's score, while not bad, sort of in the middle of the table for Division 5A, is still very beatable. So a bit unfortunate there. And looking at the table, only 10th place for him at the moment. So yeah, definitely some points that he could have used. Interestingly enough, with 62,000 total score, for his total score, like he's still, I mean, he is at the bottom now, but it doesn't really, it's not like the typical view of a table where you're like, oh, he clearly had a yellow card, he's missing 20,000 points. It's kind of like, well, he's still fitting in there. Um, but yeah, there is kind of a little gap forming at the bottom, with Keith and Sarsel on 0 points and Damir on 2, whereas Paranoid Android in ninth already on 5 points. So some early relegation candidates there in Division 5A.
Yeah, for sure. He definitely could have used the points from even like a potential win, maybe, or even like a bonus point if he just played to the feed um, by chance. But yeah, he could have used that point to maybe make up that 3 point gap that's already formed. It's just gonna increase the amount of work he needs to do to actually challenge for the spots.
Yeah, and at the
Uh,
top, still relatively close. 12 points for Greasy in first, 7 points for Piquet in seventh, and two more to Paranoid. Really, still everything relatively close together there.
yeah, Greasy maybe slightly running away with it. We'll see if he can maintain that consistent winning record. But all the way down to Clemu, maybe even Biquet possibly, you could see some of these players making it into either one of the promotion spots. So even though they're like down in like seventh even, they still have a pretty good chance. It's very close in this
Yeah, and
division.
Ace is always being a good indication. Piquet on 9, second most after Jack with 13. So definitely still a good shot for them to climb their way back up into those spots. If they want to do it next week, those are the people that they will be facing. Very interesting almost top of the table matchup. First against third, with Greasy against Mr. Fish. Uh, Certainly an interesting matchup for them. And I guess kind of with Keith, definitely with his home country, and Straussall, just the neighboring country. Their first, well, their probably biggest chances of their first points. With at least somewhat of a home advantage. I mean, I don't know how much of an advantage Virginia would be to just, an American that's not from there, but we'll talk about that maybe at the end when we preview that map in particular. But, what would be a better time than to start picking up some points now?
Yeah, for sure. And meanwhile, Jack, after that loss from last week, had himself a pretty easy matchup for this one. Or well, you'd think so, based on the table. We do know Paranoid can put up a good performance at times. Um, but yeah, I'm interested to see if Paranoid can maybe put up a good performance um, this week and maybe uh, lift himself a little further away from relegation spots, which would also be important to maybe pad that gap in case he does have some more bad weeks. Not being able to fall to the players further down.
Yeah, definitely. In his position, you want that gap to be as big as possible. So any kind of points would be good points, just making it as large as you can. Looking at Division 4 then. Division 4B, as I said before, any of the other seeds that weren't Division 5 seeds were kind of a similar difficulty, I would say. Relatively comparable. And we do see some higher scores here, although Solar Sensei, the only one going over 21,000 points. Um, Overall, though, relatively consistent throughout, I'd say here. It looks like, just looking at these scores, a kind of seed where you had about like 4 people actually, kind of finding 3 rounds and having trouble with the other 2. Another 3 people doing a pretty good job on 4 rounds, and then just another 2 doing a very good job on 4 rounds and just kind of having trouble with the 5th. And then Solar Sensei, the only one who kind of picked up points in every round. And that does lead him to his next win in a pretty important game against Jake.
Yeah, I'd say a bit of an upset against Jake there, but Solo's been doing so well so far, so he's definitely got to be happy with his performance. A really good performance for a map like Argentina, a map like the one we had, which was so rural heavy. So he's definitely got to be happy with himself. We did have 2 very close matchups. Sheldon against McPete, only 370 points apart. So that one was pretty close. And then Ollie versus Dromi, even closer, just 182 points separating them.
Yeah, always
Mm,
unfortunate to lose to such fine margins, especially down there in the lower scores too, because that's the difference between potentially 3 points for Ollie and 0 for Dromi. Whereas, it's a bit easier to stomach if you're in the bonus point range anyway, like Mikpiet is.
yeah. So yeah, definitely the good performances, do give you bonus points, even if you're a bit unlucky with such a close game. Um, and meanwhile, maybe some of the uh, more expected result with Push Deadly picking up a win against Seppo. Um, he's bursting well ahead of the others, and then we kind of had a matchup, closer to the bottom with Jean and Laban Greb. Um, I would have expected Laban Greb to win. I know he has a bit of a kind of home field advantage with Argentina, so seeing him lose there is actually a little bit surprising to me. But um, yeah, Jean's got to be pretty happy with that, and it just makes Laban Greb's work in the next few weeks a little tougher.
Yep. Looking at the table, currently in last place in 10th. A bit unfortunate. His total score not that bad at 82,000 points. At least higher than 3 of the others above him. But yeah, so far just not really had a lot of luck in his matchups. And to be fair, did also have one of the worst scores here in Argentina, so not just an unlucky matchup this time. And yeah, we kind of mentioned how Solar Sensei has been doing too well. So he's been doing very well so far. He can never do too well.
Mhm.
And Lunacy pointed out to me yesterday when we were talking and recording some match casts that Solar Sensei actually has the highest total score through all of the divisions with his 95,683 points. So just a very, very good performances from him so far, which only led him to fourth place instead of any higher. So maybe he as well a little bit unlucky on some of his matchups. Has also struck me as because he's, there's always the daily challenges on the subreddit, and I've started playing them again recently, and Solar Sensei is as well. And from
Yeah.
watching him play there, he's kind of struck me as a person who is kind of good to very good at everything. So, which is also kind of why I think his total score is so high, because he doesn't really have any lows. He might just, in those matches where kind of everyone gets close to those 25Ks, might not have maybe the pinpointing abilities, might struggle a little bit with that, which is what stops him from really being at the top of the table. But kind of the more difficult maps we have, I think the more they play into his favor. So looking forward to some of the coming weeks. Definitely a good candidate to look at for this promotion fight. And generally, I think with what we're looking at here, I mean, the top 5 is probably who will decide the promotion spots between themselves. But they're all still very close together. Total score is kind of wildly differing. But yeah, it can just be any kind of bad week, just a week off against maybe a direct opponent can really impact your chances there.
Yeah, Solar definitely has had a fairly unlucky season despite putting up very good performances. This is something we talk about a lot, but in the first week, he put up the second best score, only to end up going against Seppo, who put up the best score of the division. And in week 3, he was really close to a perfect game, only to have Dromi 1 point off and pick up a draw in that instance. So um, yeah, and not uh, he hasn't had the luckiest season so far in terms of matchups, especially because some of those went to players lower down. But with really good scores like we saw this week, I do think we'll definitely see an upward trajectory from him in terms of the rankings.
And looking at next week, we've actually got some super interesting matchups for Virginia, in particular. Solar Sensei up against Sheldon Wong in Virginia is gonna be a match to behold. I can say I'm not going to say anything about his performance on his seed, but he's played some of the other seeds and he has had some ridiculous scores there. With I think he had a 25K in 6 minutes or something like that on one of the seeds. So either he is from Virginia or somewhere close by, or he just really knows the state inside out. And yeah, against another American, though, could be a tough match. Maybe if, as well, if you're that good at a map, you probably want the seed to be difficult, or at least, your opponent not to be someone who's also very good at the map. So a bit unfortunate there. And a similar situation, we've got second against fourth here, and we've got first against third with Pashtetli against Jake, which, also a very fun matchup.
Yeah. I don't know how much I want to give away, but Solar is very familiar with Virginia. Um, Something that some of us found out a few weeks ago when we had Virginia in La Ligue entre Camus. But uh, yeah, he's very good. Sheldon, maybe, as you said, maybe a bit unlucky with his matchup going up against another American, where he definitely could have used maybe one of his European opponents to maybe pick up a slightly easier win. Um, and then, meanwhile, Pushtetley versus Jake, two players at the top of the table facing off against each other. Jake, you might say, has the advantage there, but that's probably going to be a really interesting match to watch for sure.
Yeah, interesting week in general as well. Just, everything's close together. All the matchups are people who are not too far apart from each other in the table. Maybe Ollie against Laban, 5th against 10th, the most spread out matchup. But even in that kind of matchup, it's kind of, I want to say, a must win for both. For Ollie, obviously, as he'll want to keep close to those promotion spots that he is at the cusp of. And for Laban, obviously, because, well, he's on 4 losses out of 4 games so far. So any points would be good. And yeah, I mean, he'd rather take those points against someone who he's not up against an American, is basically my point. So he's got a decent shot of at least getting a good score and maybe having a bit of luck in the sense that, his opponent might not be too familiar with Virginia. All right, then
Yeah.
let's look over into Division 4A. And we see you there with, is that should not have been enough for a bonus point, right? Not quite. I think 6th best score there. A little bit unfortunate.
Yeah, wasn't my great performance, for sure. So, I will definitely have to take that loss and move on. It was against Lunacy, one of the stronger players, but um, um, as you might know, having trained extensively for Argentina um, before this, it's a bit of an upset
Mm.
for myself. Um, Yeah, not the best match for me. Looking at the rest of the division, some very close matches. Hexalt and Hidikmi was a surprise draw right there, just 79 apart, 79 points apart, and yeah, with some of the lower scores in the division, that's definitely a surprise, for sure.
Yeah, they both couldn't have found a better matchup for each other. Both coming out with 1 point at least there, which, you could say neither of them really deserved in that, with that particular score. But, well, sometimes you're on the lucky side of things. And I mentioned specifically, I singled out Sepkirs last week and was kind of talking about how he's been having a really unimpressive season so far. And he just straight up comes out and puts up 23,000 points here. So I'm like, well, all right then, go on. A bit unfortunate for Xander there with the second best score, which we've had quite a lot so far already this season, kind of first and second on a seed up against each other. Does still take his bonus point, but would have preferred obviously going up, going up against anyone else on that week. And Zotomo winning the very important game against Danny J, which we'll see in the table in a second, very crucial for him to win that one and puts him in a much better position as we see here, which leaves Danny J unfortunately still maybe a bit over his head in this division. Bit unlucky, bit lucky perhaps in preseason with some of the seeds, and a little bit out of his depth here. But again, there's still a few weeks to go. Unfortunately, now already 4 points behind ninth place in Hayemine, who also has a very high total score, actually. So another person who's maybe gotten a bit unlucky with matchups so far. So it will be very tough for him to climb his way out of there. But, it's not too late. He's still got a shot.
Yeah, for sure. And we do see actually, Seb Kirst was, I don't know what rank he was before this week, but somewhere below 6th. And, pulling off that win against Xander, definitely a pretty big upset. I'm happy for sure because it means I'm not falling as far behind
Mhm.
some of them. Uh, but yeah, that's definitely one of the upsets we saw. And then Lunacy and I just swapping spots. There is a bit of a gap forming above us, and so like myself, Wakelock, Seb, Kirst, and Zotomo all on the same number of points makes the midfield, the competition pretty strong down here, and pretty much any of us with a win can once again be challenging Lunacy and maybe even Hexalt and Xander if they have some bad weeks. Um,
Yeah, slight gap already there with the 3 points, but as you said, if one of the top three has a loss at any point, then it's easy to catch back up. Sepp Kirst was in eighth last week. The arrows here are actually slightly wrong. Satomo was already in seventh. It was just kind of Sepp Kirst and Hedekmi swapping positions. Hedekmi was sixth in the previous week. And yeah, very close still, impressively close in the midfield there with four people on 6 points. And
And the
let's,
same record
yeah,
so
true,
far. But
true. Yeah, already also three of them very close in terms of total score. Just you standing out a bit there with 10,000 points more than the other three. But yeah, next week you up against Sepp Kjærst, who just came off a 23,000 point score in Argentina. How do you feel about that one?
it's it's not looking too good. Both of us, as we said earlier, on 6 points. So this matchup is going to be really important for the two of us if we want to, um, jump up a bit. And um, unless we draw, the loser of the match is going to find themselves in a much harder position um, to work their way out from. Um, and well, the Americans in here mostly picking up matches against non-American opponents, except Zotoma and Xander. Um, then that's going to be an interesting one to see. Um, Zotoma definitely has his work cut out for himself if he wants to pick up some points there. But on a high from last week, we'll see what he can do.
Yeah, I'd say Virginia probably not an area he's overly familiar with in the US itself. More so the kind of west northwest familiarity there for him. But he's still American, so might be better for him than some of the other maps this week. I think for him, it'll depend a lot on the type of seed we get, whether he's got a good chance against Xander or not. He himself would have probably preferred, again, a non-American as an opponent. I think Lunacy is going to be heavily favored against Hedekmi there. And yeah, the other matchup, I think Hexalt also probably, unless we see another surprise performance by Wakelock, probably the favorite there, even after his relatively weak Argentina game. And Danny J again with kind of a do or die match after that last one against Satomo, now against the new ninth place in Heyemine. Probably already with Division 4 only having 10 players and therefore only going to week 9, maybe his last chance at getting out of that 10th place. Potentially, I mean, it's not going to be mathematically, but he would need a monumentous change of fortune after this week if he loses against Teyemini and still wants to somehow get out of that. So I do think it's probably fair to say it's his last real opportunity to make that happen.
Yeah, for sure. It's he's building himself a pretty large mountain to climb if he wants to come back on into the fray, even for maybe at least getting like a playoff spot for relegation, save himself. And so yeah, maybe he'll pull off some upsets, which will help the rest of us. Maybe not in this case since it's against Yemeni, but um, so far it's not looking too likely, unfortunately. Um, I'm rooting for him. We'll see if he puts up a good performance for once.
Yeah, we'll watch him and see if he can. Moving on to Division 3, a relatively even scores, I would say. None too high. Everyone's struggling at least on one round, but also none too low. Kind of going from 16k to 22, almost 23k there. In terms of results, I think again most of them kind of going the way you would expect. I mean, Hugo with just one country over, the only South American in here, always was going to have a pretty good performance. Flipster, Diesel, not really surprising. Maybe the only two that you could see as a bit surprising is Tante, who managed a great win against Paulinho and closed kind of, I would have probably said, a relatively even matchup before going into this week, but kind of keeps Freckles on his losing streak, who's really not having a good season.
Yeah, Freckles, like you said, not the best season. Picked up a yellow card in the first week, and then I think hasn't really bounced back from that since. Um, but yeah, definitely a lot of results that we expected. Flipster and Diesel picking up those wins, um, and close. All three Germans in here picked up wins this week, and Paulina with a bit of an upset there. Um, that's going to bode very well for Tanta, as we'll see in just a sec.
Yep, and
Um,
that second is now. um,
mhm.
the errors for this one are slightly wrong. Which I'm not quite well. I forgot about doing a little part of the spreadsheet. I fixed that now. They're still slightly wrong, I think, or maybe they're not wrong. Maybe I'm just being stupid. Never mind, I'm being dumb. I was looking at the wrong columns. I was just surprised that Paulinho basically gaining a spot in a loss, but probably bonus point there coming in and some other results going his way. With most of the people who were close by behind him losing their games this week. Um, so yeah, kind of still this Nick and Diesel running away a bit at the top, not only with 4 wins out of 4, but also if you look at their aces, pretty far ahead of the rest of the field. Flipster starting his climb back up after having to play the first 2 weeks. Well, not without any chance of really any competition. And yeah, other than that, pretty good week for the likes of Hugo and Tante as well, who managed to climb out of those lower spots.
Yeah, there was definitely a week where Hugo could have, as you said earlier, expected to win with kind of a home advantage, but not quite. And we'll see if he can maintain the momentum from that. Maybe the win is what he needed to start his march on up. Um, and then, Paulinho's move up is, as I said, a little surprising, but with one of the better scorers that in the division, that helps his total score, and I think that's where you kind of see like the tiebreakers coming into play, and that could be important to maybe stay up in the playoff spots as opposed to the um, just falling out on one of the tiebreakers.
Yeah.
And
Most interesting thing actually about this table that I just noticed is how close the total scores are. If you kind of ignore Flipster for obvious reasons and Freckles for his yellow card, then everyone is between like 86k and 94k, which is a lot closer throughout the whole field than we've seen in, divisions 4 and 5, where there was always 2, 3 people who were a bit behind everyone else by a few thousand points, which, is interesting to see that we don't see that here. It might be either a factor of easier seeds or just generally, the level being higher and everyone being more comfortable on more of the maps.
I think it's definitely going to be a lot of players being fairly close in terms of skill level because we see Paulinho all the way down to Pastek just 3 points apart. So in just a week, someone could drop all the way from, or rather jump all the way from like a relegation spot into even a promotion spot. A lot of matches have to go a particular way, but it is a conceivable outcome with the state of the division so far.
Yeah, and we'll see if those matches go that particular way with what we've got here for next week. And yeah, again, I mean, with how close the table is, there's always going to be interesting matchups all around. Interesting ones here, I think, definitely Freckles against Pastek. Kind of Freckles, it's getting close there at the bottom of the table. He'll need some points very soon, and I think this is a good opportunity for him. No Americans actually in this division at all. Might actually be the only one. Not 100% sure, but that certainly makes it interesting as well. Kind of, if you've got a few Americans in the division, you kind of expect it to be more difficult to pick up the bonus points. If you're, a non-American, as you expect those top spots to be taken up by some high scores. So that's not a factor here. I think also Paulinho closed in third and fourth. Definitely an interesting matchup for sure. think Hugo against Steal the Snick, even if there's quite a big difference in their position in the table, is also a matchup I expect to, usually, come down to fine margins as well.
Yeah, as you said, this division is so close. Like most of these matches, you'd expect to have some pretty close scores. Um, and I just the moment you like opened up the fixtures, I was like scanning the table, and it is in fact possible for Pastek, all the way down in ninth in a relegation spot to make it into a promotion spot. So um, we need certain matches to go a certain way, but it's possible. We'll see if it holds up. But like we said, anything is possible with these matchups. They're so close. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Maybe something like this will happen. Be an
Yep.
interesting little tidbit.
Always fun if crazy stuff happens. Yeah, I was just
Exactly.
while you were talking, I was checking as well. It doesn't even necessarily need a bonus point for a perfect game or anything. Just 3 points would technically be enough to get him to fourth. But yeah, good luck, Pastek. We want to see you in the promotion spots next week. Make it happen. Um,
Yeah.
and let's move over to Division 2, where unfortunately Aston picks up his first yellow card of the week against the top scorer of Renato. Probably not, not the worst place you could have picked up that yellow card. Certainly a lot better than Damia's one. But obviously, never a good thing to pick up a yellow card. Kind of takes away that safety cushion of, you never know what happens. Maybe there's just anything that goes wrong in a week, and if it happens to you twice, then well, you'll unfortunately just be out. Pretty solid score from Verdok as well, as you'd kind of always expect from him, picking up his win. And finally, first points and first wins for both Guelo and Real Clyde Cameron, who came out swinging this week.
Yeah, for sure. And those are going to be wins there. I'm going to need, as we'll see in the table after a little while, both of them near the bottom. They will definitely need the, the wins there um, to kind of stay out of relegation spots. So yeah, those wins coming in very handy. We did see a matchup near the top with Samo versus Wardok, and I mean for Argentina, it is a pretty good close game. But yeah, Wardok still picking up a win by what is it, like 2,000 points?
Yeah, it's
Um, actually
1900 roughly.
1941. Um, yeah. Um, actually, a few matchups near the top, I think. Actually, no. Stock versus Boutbat was more middle of the table.
So, looking at the Division 2 table, which we now have in slightly different formats, Satomo failed to either generate it or name it correctly. It's an interesting table to look at with kind of an upper half and a lower half, and the 4 point gap between those two halves, with 7th to 12th just 1 point apart, and 1st to 6th just 3 points apart. Some total scores also kind of fitting in there, except for Armand with his yellow card, as well as Aston there. So yeah, very interesting table to look at here.
Yeah, for sure. We did see Renata and Wardok, 2 points clear of the competition. Definitely favorites for the direct promotion spots. But after that, as you said, it's both with Samo through Stock, um, and then a big gap down to Aston, all the way down to Guala Wizard. So, um, you know, uh, if any of them have a match against each other, it's going to be very important for them um, to, maybe get out of the relegation spots. I don't think it may be all but out of the cards for any of them to maybe make it into the fight for promotion. I think they're just going to be fighting to stay out of relegation at this point. But I mean, this is one of the 12-player divisions. They've got a longer season, and so they have more time to find their way out. And with it as close as it is, um, they'll be looking to pick up any points that they can get to create a gap behind them.
Yeah, I definitely think it's possible for someone to make it out of that bottom half and into the promotion spots, but most likely just one person. I can't really say who that one person might be yet, but I think it's unrealistic for more than one person out of the bottom half to still make it into the promotion spots. There's just too many variables that would have to go right for them. And yeah, let's take a look. Let's switch back. Let's do that correctly and have a look at who they'll be playing against in this next week to see if there's some good matchups for some of those, bottom half players. And well, I mean, for the two Americans of this division, for Real Clyde and Guelo, not particularly the matchup they would have preferred. I would assume Armor is just always gonna be a very difficult matchup, especially on a map like Virginia if the seed is not too difficult. That's kind of for me like a more standout quality that he can just like pretty much 25k in easy seed super quickly. So maybe not the perfect matchup for Cameron there. Guelo with Aston, I mean, he can hope that Aston just doesn't play again, but if he does play, not a very easy matchup, though probably better than Amor. So yeah, it'd be interesting if they can keep up that momentum from their Argentina wins. Yeah, other than that, I think Samo against Bubat is also a very interesting matchup where Samo had a surprisingly good season so far as a newcomer, and Bubat was, surprisingly struggling quite a bit. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes as well.
Yeah, as you said, we have a few matchups that are, um, players higher up versus players lower down, which the players like Wordok and Renata who find themselves uh, actually Renata's opponent is just in fourth, so that's not as bad. But
Oops.
Wordok up in second is playing Max down in 11th. Like I said, Clyde and Qual Wizard with French opponents a fair bit further up them on the table. Uh, they might be expecting a win, but these are going to be important matches for um, players like Max and Clyde and Guado Wizard to win, because that would give them an edge up on their opponents down at the bottom of the table, where, as we saw, the competition is really close. And so, even one upset from any of them might be what they need to break into that um, promotion battle, as you said.
Yeah, so let's move on to our final division for today, Division 1, and their results in Argentina. And unfortunately, it is another loss for me in a game where I really should have been, by any means, around Pluki's score. 4 rounds around like 4.5 to 5k. And one round where if I had not found a sign, I would have been around the 4k mark. But because I did find a sign, that was providing me with some faulty information, I'm going to call it. Unfortunately, drops me all the way down. Still enough for a bonus point with basically just 4 played rounds, essentially. But very annoying there. Could have definitely, made good use of a win here. Uh, just unfortunate, but great score from Bastel. As my opponent there as well with the second highest score. Another unfortunate factor. Of course, I couldn't have then just had the luck of facing off against someone with a worse score. Yeah, other than that, relatively clear matchups in the sense that none of them were particularly close. Mason against Nimrith, I think the closest one there with a little over 2,000 points separating the two of them. And yeah, Shumi having a really rough time of Argentina.
Yeah, it definitely some very not very close matchups over here in a division where I would have expected a lot of players to have a fairly equal skill level. So yeah, that's definitely interesting to see Shumi with not the best um, performance this week. I don't know what happened there, but yeah, and definitely one where maybe he could have eked out a draw or a win with a performance more in line with other players in the division. But well, it is what it is, and um, yeah, that's probably not going to bode too well for Shumi's efforts to maybe try for one of the coveted playoff spots in the division.
Yeah, and I think this is actually a good seed that kind of showed or shows for Division One who really practiced and who didn't really do too much practice. Because I think actually, like ignoring that Division Five seed, this was probably the most difficult seed out of the others, and the only reason we're seeing pretty high scores here is just the skill of the players and the amount of practice put in, and that's kind of what's making the difference here. Which is kind of why I assume Shumi struggling so badly with the basement. I know also didn't really put in well, more than just a little bit of practice with this seed. I know Mr. Blue not putting up that much practice this season, so I think that's kind of what's making the difference in this week here. And looking at the table, it's still very, very close, everything. Barry in first still with his 10 points ahead of Pluki, Mason, just slight gaps. And yeah, it's just down there at the bottom. I'm 2 points behind, sort of like the main group, and Total Radio not having had, very enjoyable. Well, I hope he's had an enjoyable season. It's just not been crowned by success so far with his 2 points in 10th place.
Yeah, this is another one. Like I said, you'd expect this division to be pretty close, and again, we have um, players all the way down to Shumi, like from Barry to Shumi, all within 4 points of each other. That is a hill that can very easily be overcome. You have your work cut out for yourself if you want to get out of the relegation playoff spots. Um, yeah, it's nothing great, but I mean your total score is something that would be closer to the likes of Basement, so um, maybe you can find your way out. Jimmy's lower total score may be a result of um, the not very great performance this week.
Yeah, definitely. That dragged him down a lot.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think I've said, I don't know where I've said this before. I might have just said it last week, where I think the second half of the season, kind of after Virginia, I'm purposely excluding that from it. I think fits me a little bit better. So I do still have confidence that I can at least get, maybe that seventh place. I think, playoffs are kind of out of reach at this point, just because I don't think I can go on a run of like winning every remaining game. But still plenty to play for. And looking at next week, though, maybe not where I can start the comeback. Pluki is not a good opponent for me. I don't think I've ever beaten him. I've played him a bunch of times. I think last season I drew against him, if I remember right, on a world map. Or was it a world map? I think I remember he got like a 25k and I got like 24997 or something like that. I just don't remember which map it was on. But I do favor him generally on a lot of different maps. Virginia is one of those. I'm not sure if he's particularly good at Virginia. I just know I'm particularly bad at a map like this. And I can explain why again more as we talk about it later. And the other matchups, the two Americans, Mason and Barry, going up against Mr. Blue and Bastel. I think Mason probably favored for that game against Mr. Blue. Again, just, American factor and, Mr. Blue not putting in too much practice. And Barry against Bastel could actually be an interesting one. I think that's maybe a little bit closer, potentially. But again, Barry probably the favorite here. And then Basement against Shumi is probably the closest game, I imagine, of this division this week.
Yeah, as you said, Barry was the best child. That's probably the match I'm looking most forward to. Both of them putting in really good performances. You know, Bastel, one of the newcomers, doing really well, and then Barry after promoting from Division Two. He's just skyrocketed up the standings. Um, so yeah, I'm really excited to see how that goes. Obviously, Barry had the home field advantage, but uh, yeah, we'll see if Bestel can pull off an upset right there. I did actually check, and you did win against Plucky last season
Oh, did I?
by about 2,000 points.
Oh, then I must have
Um,
been thinking of a different, either a different season or some other map where I maybe wasn't playing against
mhm,
him. What map was it on,
yeah,
out of
it
curiosity?
was on Jordan, so
Ah, okay,
uh,
yeah.
it's a very different map this time around. Well,
Very, very different, yes. Unfortunately.
yeah,
I would have liked it to be more like Jordan. Yeah, the season I was thinking of was season 4, where he did get the perfect score, and I was 3 points short in Lakes of the World, actually. So, yep, again, not like Virginia at all.
yeah, and like you said, Mr. Blue versus Mason. Oh, it's going to be an important one for Mr. Blue if he does want to contend for one of the playoff spots. Um, but Mason, again, one of the newcomers, been doing really well so far um, in this division. So, uh, yeah. And with the home field advantage, definitely one of the favorites right here.
Yep. So let's talk some more about Virginia now. Map by element PNW, regional map covering all of Virginia. Some locations cross borders slightly. I'm assuming that just means he drew a polygon and wasn't very particular about it. But yeah, over 10,000 locations. And I think I've mentioned before, we've played a lot of US states in the past, starting with, I think it was Minnesota, Pennsylvania, California, Idaho. And yeah, I think the one I'm missing was a Canadian state. And I think out
Yeah,
of
that's
those,
uh,
yeah, Saskatchewan. Out of those, I think it's a lot more like Pennsylvania than all of the others, which I think are quite different in how they play. Well, it's almost bordering Pennsylvania, so it's not a huge surprise, but just in a way that it's not very diverse landscape wise. You can't really tell where you are just by that. It's not got a nice road numbering system, like the numbers are just all over the place. Um, there's like a billion counties you could learn if you want to. And yeah, not. I'm trying to find something positive for it, but I just can't. What about you?
um, yeah, definitely got to echo a lot of the same points there. It's not a great state if you like to, just look for road numbers and that kind of thing. A bit of a tip from playing a lot of it: don't trust the road numbers; they repeat all the
Hmm.
time. Uh, um, there's a weird system to how they're laid out, but it's like it's almost like per county, which makes it even harder to work with. Um, that's not going to be great. It is a map you can kind of region guess on, at least in terms of how far west or east you are, not so much north or south. So that's going to be the harder bit to contend with right here. And as you can see by that average score, just below 15,000, it's not the easiest map.
Yep, for sure. Can have very easy seeds though. I think Virginia is
Mhm.
one of those with kind of again similar to Pennsylvania, where if you've got an easy seed, you're just gonna 25k in like 10, 15 minutes without much problems. But can just have locations in there where it's just like, well, I've walked 4 minutes, I found nothing. Great. What now? And if you get multiple of those locations, it can be a very frustrating experience to play. So yeah, it's definitely. I think it's gonna come down a lot to what kind of seeds certain divisions are gonna get. Will have a big influence on the kind of results. And yeah, well, let's just get this one over with. And we'll
Mhm.
look forward to more fun maps after that. Is probably what most people will think, except for some Americans. Um, yeah, that will do it for the Reddit League show this week. I hope you've all enjoyed watching. Thanks for doing so, and we'll see you guys again next week. Bye.
Bye.